Welcome to the pod focusing on the aftermath and recovery from the devastating Palisades fires of January 2025. Journalist Joel Pollak, entrepreneur Oren Ezra, and technology expert Ron Goldschmidt serve up to the moment vital news and information, discuss the ongoing recovery efforts, and introduce us to the individuals and trades who are playing key roles in rebuilding our cherished communities. We're diving into the deep end and learning quickly how we can move forward together. We know the pain because we're living real-time news, stories, resources, and insights on the ongoing recovery effort. Buckle up. We're three homeless guys.
Welcome to Three Homeless Guys, the podcast about the Palisades fire and the effort to rebuild. I'm journalist Joel Pollak, here with technology expert Ron Goldschmidt, and our friend, entrepreneur Oren Ezra, is traveling, as am I. I'm not in my usual temporary home. I'm here in Terminal 1 of LAX, about to head to the Bay Area for the day, coming back down by the end of the day. So we are all over the place. This is a very busy travel time of year: Easter, Passover, spring break, work. So we are trying to manage all that and wishing you, of course, safe travels, and hopefully the three of us won't get lost along the way any more than we already are. But we have a very special guest today, and we're going to jump right into that as soon as we go through a couple of news items. And the only news I have, Ron, is I had a really interesting meeting this week with Rick Caruso. I was able to sit down with him, and we talked a little bit about the future of the Palisades, and he seemed enthusiastic about coming on the podcast. We have Tracy Park coming up in an upcoming episode, our city council member. We had Lindsay Horvath from the Board of Supervisors. So people are eager to appear on the podcast. They know that this is something people listen to and watch throughout the community, and we're going to be here for all of it. So that's a little bit of news, and we'll have more details on that as it unfolds. But go ahead, Ron, and before we introduce Alicia.
Yeah, I don't have anything special. Obviously, like some of our listeners have been noticing, our schedule's a bit off the last couple weeks. We are traveling, spring break, all of it. We're still trying to pump out 2 episodes a week. The times might be off, but we're still trying to get there. So you know, we'll keep on doing that throughout the next few weeks. Just like keep up with us on our irregular scheduling. And also, please, I'm told this by a podcast expert, because we this is our first time podcast. Please subscribe to all the channels that you're on. So that's my only nudge here. Apparently, that's what you're supposed to say in the first couple minutes of a podcast. So here we go.
Right, click like and subscribe. I mean, yeah. I've listened to enough of these where I should know that that's what you're supposed to do, right?
Yes, and there's more and more listeners, so that's great. And welcome Alicia to the podcast. How have you been? I know you have a young family. How is traveling and spring break dealing with the Cohen family these days? 'Cause I know it's rough over here.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for having me on your podcast. I've been following, and I know the caliber of guest speakers that you have. So very honored to be part of the, I guess, shall we call it homeless club? So yes, thank you. And yeah, I'm actually up in the Bay Area. I don't know where you're going to be, Joel. I'm in Orinda right now, and we've been here basically since the fire. So spring break of next week, we're actually doing a little road trip, since, being nomads, that seems to be our preferred form of transportation these days. So yeah, hopefully the kids will be well behaved. But yeah, it's been a lot.
So, Alicia, let me just, by way of a broader introduction, talk about how I came to know you. You are a neighbor of mine in the Marquez Knolls area, and actually anybody who drove up to the Marquez Charter Elementary School would have seen your picture, because in your real estate career, you had sponsored or donated to the school and the committee that helps fund activities at the school. It still does, Friends of Marquez. And so you had a big poster on the fence, and some of those posters are still there, not in a great state, because obviously the school isn't in a great state after the fire. But you are a very well-known member of the community, and you live in a house that's also a landmark, because it is at the bottom of, I think it's Ida Street?
Yeah.
Your house is right. And so we would see you around the neighborhood, walking with your kids. I remember when you were pregnant, I think with number two, was it? Walking around, and is that right?
Well, I was actually pregnant for both my kids, but most recently, yes, Ava, she's going to be 2 June 1st.
Okay, so
So
there you
yeah.
go. Yeah, so just an example of someone that we came to know just through walking around the neighborhood. It's such a wonderful neighborhood for walks and meeting neighbors just randomly on various evenings. But you now have started this incredible newsletter or blog. I don't know what to call it exactly, but it's this fantastic project. Let's put it that way. This writing project called the Palisades Mom. And I think it's very important because the challenge of parenting and balancing all of these new difficulties in life that have arisen as a result of the fire is something that doesn't get enough attention. Oren's not here. We call him Dr. Debris. So he's always talking about debris removal, which is a major headache for many people. We have people
Yeah.
talking about construction. All of that is very important. But parenting is really a complete new level of challenge. It's challenging in ordinary times, but now especially. So you started writing. Tell us, first of all, about yourself and how this project came about.
Well, first, I really just started off as kind of late night journaling to myself. Can you hear me? I feel like it's, oh, if you can put yourself on mute. Started off kind of as late night journaling. I've always kind of enjoyed writing, and it kind of became a bit of an outlet for me. And then how it kind of turned into a little bit of a website was I had actually I'd signed up for a website for actually our Livorno block because we were trying to organize all of our thoughts, and then ended up not being a great outlet for that. Slack was actually a better one. So all I know everyone has like their kind of neighborhood group chats. That was helpful, but because I already paid for this website, I was like, all right, well, what am I going to do with it? And so then I just started kind of putting it up out there. And, part of it was escapism. Part of it was kind of processing my thoughts. And a lot of it also was just, you know what, if I'm going through these feelings and emotions, I'm sure other moms are dealing with that. And I have a lot of stay at home mom friends who I think they, live this life kind of every day. And I was kind of thrown into this a little bit more. And it is by far the most challenging job I think there is. And then on top of that, when you throw in the fact that there was like a fire and having our whole lives upended, it's something really unique. I don't think anyone can ever prepare for it. I've got 2 kids. Joel, I don't know how Julie is managing your 4 kids. By the way, tell her hi. Yeah, it's and if I could add like a little bit of humor in there too, that's I have to say my dark humor is definitely on point these days.
Well, I think it's relevant to parents in general. I'm, in a way, transitioning to being a stay-at-home dad, although I'm still working with my regular job and obviously doing other things. My wife has taken a new job and she's in a different city right now. We're going to be moving to her before moving together back to the Palisades, but basically because we can't live in the neighborhood for at least a year, we're going to do this other thing. I'll stay involved with everything, and I just had a meeting this week with an attorney who's helping me set up some nonprofits to help the community. That's another story, but I've become a stay-at-home dad in some ways, or at least a work from home and then slash full-time dad for the older 3 kids. So Julia has the baby, and I have the older 3, starting with the 3-year-old, then moving up to the 9-year-old and the 13-year-old. The 13-year-old is pretty independent, thank goodness, and she can go to friends pretty easily. The other 2, I have to do a lot more work with. I have a new appreciation for the stay-at-home mom challenges and some of the rewards as well, because in some ways it's very rewarding, but it's absolutely exhausting. So I think what you're doing is very important to parents in general, which is to document this experience as we've all been thrown into new roles and new responsibilities.
Yeah, definitely. And you know what? Talking about being a little bit more of a stay-at-home dad, one of the things I am going to launch on my blog is guest writers. And I actually have a friend that she didn't lose her house in the Palisades, just like you. And I think that that's a story that I don't think gets enough attention. I think a lot of people think, oh, you lost your house. Like, that's terrible. Oh, your house is fine. You're so lucky. And it's so not that. But I also think, maybe we can talk afterwards, but I would love to kind of hear a little bit more about a stay-at-home dad, and maybe you'd want to be a featured writer.
Well, that would be great. I mean, Ron, I know will have some thoughts about the differences because among the three homeless guys, Ron and Oren lost their homes. Mine is still standing. There are pluses and minuses in that the insurance challenges are more complicated if your home is still standing. But I think
Yeah.
emotionally it is easier if you have your house still there. I had to throw away 90% of what was in my house over the last few weeks, which was difficult. But at least I had the opportunity to look at things, to sift
Hmm.
through things, to find things I had been looking for years and hadn't found until I had to decide whether to throw it away or not. I mean, you
Yeah.
recover these parts of your life. I think that's a level of psychological integrity that we've been privileged to have. At the same time, the stress of the mortgage payments plus the insurance fights has been incredibly difficult. So there are
Yeah.
ups and downs to it all.
I like to say it's kind of pick your poison. It's either you lose your house and that sucks, or you didn't lose your house and it's just nightmare battle with insurance and you know,
I,
sorry about your house, Ron,
I
too.
think,
By the way, I love your neighborhood. I always call that neighborhood Malibu because it's like
yeah,
Palisades, Malibu.
yes, exactly. I still think that the folks who didn't lose their house actually have it tougher because
Hmm.
the financial angle of it is so large. Like
Yeah.
the financial piece of it is a lot larger. And not to say that we're, like clear sailing with the insurance companies, but I think for the folks, everybody that I've heard that has a house still standing, which they call smokers apparently in the industry,
Okay.
um, they are having a much harder time with insurance because there's so
Hmm.
much more to argue about that the house, is still there and, the content's salvageable or not. I
Hmm.
think also, if your house is gone, you kind of have to make a clear break. You kind of have to
Hmm.
decide, okay, well, I'm going to move somewhere else. I'm going to start my life somewhere else. We're going through that process right now as well. I have three kids. They all are going to different schools next year. We've had to apply to different schools. One of them went to Marquez. That school burned down.
Hmm.
It's a whole reshuffle, but at least we know, we have that piece of information that it's going to be somewhere else for the next couple of years. For the people
Yeah.
that have their house standing, they have to go back into a very uncomfortable and like strange situation where you're living in the middle of a war zone, and you have all this financial, fights with the insurance companies um, on the side. That just I feel like it's a tougher spot to be in, and it's almost easier to like understand where your destination is going to be in the next couple of years, and it's just going to be out of the neighborhood.
Yeah. No, I definitely feel that. I think the way I've sort of described it is like you lose your house, it's clean. It's just that's kind of end of the story. And when you're sort of in this weird limbo of like your house surviving, and then insurance companies like, yeah, like move back tomorrow, and you're like, no, no, thank you. Yeah, that's definitely challenging. And actually, one thing I wanted to kind of talk to you quickly about is you're talking about schools. Like, I think that's another thing that just I don't think people realize like how challenging it is as parents. I've got two young kids. My son, he's in preschool. He was at Kalat Israel on Sunset, which actually that was one of the few buildings that survived. But as you know, there's a lot of smoke remediation that goes on with that. And now they're at Beth Shear in Santa Monica. But he was supposed to start in the fall at Marquez. And one of the reasons we actually bought our house was I love the idea of being able to walk my kids to school, which Joel, I know that you had that luxury as well, which I feel in LA, that's huge. I mean, I hate driving, which I don't know why I moved to LA, but so being able to walk is super, super nice. And then Ava, she was actually supposed to have her first day of preschool that Wednesday before the fire. That obviously never happened. And now that we're up here, I'm, keeping her at home. It was just too much change. But I think I think moving up here was probably the best decision for a family because I think it gave my kids the most sense of normalcy, which I think every parent's trying to do that to the best of their ability. But I'd say the downside of being here is you're just a little bit more removed. And yes, I talk to my Pally Mom friends like every day, but it's sort of like I knew, and I actually would be curious too, because I know you guys are both Marquez parents, is, you sorry, I lost my train of thought. Oh
The
yeah.
challenge of
So
moving.
I knew
Yeah.
that, yeah, I know that people have not been thrilled with how, everything's gone down with Marquez. But I was in my mind, I was like, you know what? By the time we get back to LA, which will be this summer, by the time fall rolls around, like they'll work out all the kinks. And I sat in on the past two town halls, which, I don't know if you guys sat in on that, but there was a lot, of unhappy parents. And I know, look, I know that LAUSD is doing the best that they can, but I just realized at that point, my son's gonna be in TK, and like I don't want to be like one of like three kids in that class. And just something that Jennifer shares, she's the wife of the young rabbi Daniel, who I don't know if you guys know him, but he would actually make a great guest for this
That's a
podcast.
great
But
idea.
she said,
Yeah.
yeah. But what she said, because they're gonna go to the canyon, I think, and she was like, Sammy, their daughter, she's like, I just don't know if they're gonna have like the enrollment or the sort of resources to do like father daughter dance, and that's like just things that you don't really think about. And so now I'm in this like weird shuffle, like you said, where I'm like, gosh, now I gotta think about where, when we rent, I gotta look into like good school districts, and just it threw a whole wrench in my plans. But I feel like that's also just been sort of like the theme of life for us since that. But would love to know kind of what you guys are doing for schools and how you guys are handling it all.
Ron, do you want to take that one
Yeah,
first?
no. So
Yeah.
we're in the midst of it. One of the schools burnt down. That was Marquez. Another school has is still there, and yet another one for next year. I have two twins that are going to high school next year, so they're going to go to new schools anyways.
Mhm.
But one of them was going to go to Pali, and that has moved to the Sears building in Santa Monica for at least for the time being, which is interesting. And then I've got another, to make things more complicated. My other twin, is going to go to another school on the west side, and so we basically have to reshuffle our plans around like where we're going to live. And once
Mhm.
we realize that it's actually going to be unsustainable to make this trek across PCH every day
Yeah.
because the road closures and because it's just excruciating to wait in that line every day. And kudos to my wife who does this every day. I don't know how she does it. We are just basically are gonna reposition ourselves somewhere. We haven't found a place yet, but somewhere around Brentwood or Bel Air or somewhere around there for a few months. The schools situation is very tough, especially with them moving. I don't know when Pali will be back. We don't know when Marquez will be back, obviously. But basically, the idea is that we just have to make you know we have to make do with the bad situation and just go for a new adventure somewhere else. It's tough, but it's something that needs to be done. And the more I think about it, the more I realize that being outside of the neighborhood will be actually healthier, because just going through the the neighborhood and PCH every day is kind of depressing, honestly.
Mhm.
And so we'll have to make do somewhere else for a couple of years while we rebuild, and we are rebuilding.
Yeah, for our part, we have had a more stable school situation, partly because our eldest goes to Milton, so she was already outside the area. Her Palisades bus route still exists, but I don't know how many kids are able to take it. The bus that takes the kids from Palisades to Milton stopped in the Riviera neighborhood, so I think where people are moving back there, I think there may be a couple of families that still take that bus, but we've had to change bus lines as we've hopped around, first to Santa Monica, then Sawtell, now we're in Beverlywood. But she's still going to the same school, and she's been able to maintain contact with her friends and keep her activities up and everything, so that's been easier. Likewise with our 3-year-old who is going to preschool in Santa Monica. We had her actually at the Chabad preschool in Palisades until
Mhm.
this school year, and we moved her to Santa Monica for a variety of reasons. Now, my son, the 9-year-old, who, Alicia, as you know, would just roll out of bed and walk to school. I mean, that was really one of the delightful things about living right next to the school. He is going to Marquez, which has relocated to Nora Sterry in Sawtell.
Mhm.
And we may be one of the few families that has been very happy with that transition, probably because, first of all, I think the staff have done an incredible job. I think they've
Mhm.
done as much as they can do under the circumstances in very, very challenging situations. And Dr. Reeves, who's the principal, is incredible. I don't know any other principal in the entire LAUSD system who I've heard of who is as amazing as this woman is. She's just unbelievably capable. Even at Marquez before the fire, you'd see her car in the parking lot till 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. She was working so hard, and now she's added to all that by managing this transition. So I think the staff have been incredible. The teachers, Mr. Jacobs is my son's teacher, absolutely incredible, just very, very helpful to the kids. My son has also managed to bond with some of the Norris Dairy kids in fourth grade. I understand there were some problems in third grade and fifth grade. I don't know exactly if that was universal across the classes and so forth, but I think because my son loves sports, he was able to connect with the Norris Dairy kids over baseball and basketball and things like that. So there has been an interesting friendship developing between some of the kids, at least at Norris Dairy and Marquez, even though the two schools are still physically separate, even on the same campus. But there has been a drop in enrollment. And actually, Ron, I should bring this clip next time when we do the next episode just to show people. They did the morning assembly, which normally took place on Fridays. They've moved it to Mondays. They did the morning assembly on Monday this week. And it was the first time I had heard the kids sing the school song and the Pledge of Allegiance since the fire. And it was very moving to, first of all, watch the kids perform this, which is a part of life at Marquez. It's just this beautiful Pledge of Allegiance and wonderful song, school song. And the song is about the school building on the hill. There's a school up on the hill is how the song begins. So it was moving. It was sad because obviously there's no school on the hill right now, at least not in Palisades. And it was also sad to see that the enrollment has declined so much. Half of the kids, I think, were there and half were not. And that might be putting it a little bit generously. It might even be less than half at this stage. And a lot of families have moved, and like the rabbi's family, people are moving to Canyon, people are moving to other places. I don't know if the school district is going to be able to guarantee that the staff and the faculty stay on at Marquez. They really should, because if they kept them through COVID, they could certainly keep them through this period. I do think there's a push to move back to the Marquez site, and there may be some prefabricated classrooms that they put on the lower yard, which was relatively untouched by the fire. So they may actually be able to start school in the fall on the old campus site, which is very interesting. I think that's one of the reasons our area, Marquez Knolls, has had some of the fastest debris clearance. We've seen the Army Corps of Engineers working at an extremely fast pace relative to other places. And I was actually told directly by the Army Corps that they are prioritizing school areas around schools for debris removal so that they can get the trucks out of the way before the school year. That's their primary concern. They want the traffic to return for people to be able to drop their kids off and pick them up again. We're not the only school. I know Mayor Karen Bass announced this week that 2 other schools in the Palisades area have also been cleared, and they're clearing debris around those schools pretty quickly. The other area, by the way, just on a side note, the other areas they're prioritizing for debris removal are areas that they call ecologically sensitive, Castellamare and other places where they're worried that runoff might move into the ocean. So I'm impressed with what's happening with the school. I don't know if enough people are going to stick around, and obviously we're not going to be there next year or the year after probably. So yeah, it's not clear to me what's going to happen, and I'm in a way I'm in your boat, Alicia, because I don't know what the future really holds. We want to be there. We found the school incredibly supportive. Again, Dr. Reeves is incredible. I think for her alone, it's worth staying at the school, because I don't think you'll have such a positive experience with any other principal. I just find her extraordinary.
We had to leave. Yeah. We had to leave North Dairy mid-year because the enrollment fell so much that my son was the only boy left in his class, and so that, and also that coupled with where it was, we had to transfer mid-year, and we transferred to Stephen West, But I noticed that there was these groups even within the Marquez community and the Norris Dairy community. There's these factions, I would call them now, where people are hardcore Norris Dairy, we're staying in Marquez no matter what. And then the other people are we'll move for a couple of years, we'll come back to Marquez. They're not as militant about it. I'm just, and I get it. I get both sides. I get both sides of the folks that want to reopen in Marquez, and I get the parents who are I don't want my kid to go to school in a prefab, you know, portable on a lot that's, you know, burnt out all around it. Like I get that too. I think like the universal message as parents for everybody, and like that's what I'm trying to instill in my kids, and I'm sure you guys are too, is like it's okay. Things change. Things are dynamic. We have to make sometimes decisions on the go, and we have to sometimes make good out of a bad situation. And the reality is, like, you know, in their life, they're going to have a lot of problems, and you know, not everything can be curated and, you know, perfect, you know, as it is the Palisades childhood could be. Unfortunately, that's the way we wanted it to go, but it's not going to happen. And maybe that could be a good lesson for the rest of their life. Like that, you know, like let's come through this. Let's do a rebuild. We'll come out with a different home, a better home at the end of it, and hopefully do some learning along the way. And I think like if you take that attitude, you can take this very, very awful experience and turn it into something positive.
I think that's a really good way to put it. And also the one other thing I want to say, first of all, Joel, that's really great to hear, you know, all those positive things. And I think if Leo was already at Marquez, I think I'd probably be much more committed to staying at Marquez, but we haven't even started. I almost like feel like a poser. So I'm like, I'm not even like there, but I, you know, care about the community a lot. And so for me that, you know, it was kind of hard to kind of think, but I'm like, you know what, we're not in it yet. So like maybe we'll do something for TK and K, and then come first grade, hopefully we'll be back. And then that will be, you know, our school. I think for KI, our preschool, I am committed there because my son had such a great experience. And like, I know probably where we're going to end up leasing, it's going to be a commute. And like, I feel like, I mean, you guys both mentioned your wives, like, you know, do a lot of the drop offs. Like, I know I'm signing up to be like an Uber driver. If I can keep one of my commutes not too terrible and it's two different pickup times, I mean, it's a lot of, you know, running around. But I do think like there has to be a level of empathy too, because I think it's very easy for parents sometimes, and like not even willingly, but to kind of judge others like, oh, like, how could you send your kid the bungalows? Like, how do you feel safe about that? Or like, why would you want to send your kid here? And I think that you have to remember that every parent is trying to come up with the best solution for their family. And I think if you look at that lens, it's a like we all have a shared trauma. Our experiences are slightly different, but I think if like we can remember that we're all just trying to do the best that we can, I think it gives a level of community. And I think that was also another reason I wanted to write my blog too, is like I think that it's easy to kind of have opinions or, you know, judge how people are doing with their families, but we're all just trying to do the best that we can.
Yeah, and there's so many moving pieces too. It's not just about the education itself. Like, sure, we all want to give our kids the best education, the best situation, but like there's so many moving pieces. Where you live,
Yeah.
where you can find rentals, where, you know,
Hmm.
where people work. It's just a whole bunch of, you know, spaghetti that was thrown at the wall, and like we have to catch all of it. And it's just it's a good lesson, I guess, if like you come through it like with shining colors, but it's also like extremely tough to make those decisions because you're not making them in a vacuum. You're making them with like 10 other factors changing every day. And I was just talking about this with my wife about how even like where we're going to live, and that side of things is changing like almost like 3 times a week, just based
Hmm.
on facts on the ground, and you know where there's good rentals, or where what traffic patterns are in PCH, or like, you know, we time commutes from like different neighborhoods that we're exploring. We're discovering new neighborhoods that we didn't even know existed. Like, you know, on the weekend I went and discovered LA for like I feel like I don't know LA anymore, like I used to, because I've discovered all these neighborhoods I didn't even know about.
Was that a wise decision, Ron? Was that really?
Yeah,
I feel
maybe
like I've
not.
discovered how difficult life is in the rest of LA.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was. I mean, I like you know, none of the neighborhoods to me like hold a candle to like where we live. At the same time, like, you know, I had these perceptions of other neighborhoods of even how they would look. I never realized like I've never actually been there. And so, you know, you find new things, and kind of like educating ourselves about like different pockets of LA, which is cool.
Alicia, I want to ask you a parenting question. So
Sure.
you mentioned some of the difficult decisions parents have to make, and I think you're 100% right. We can't judge people for anything that they're deciding, but it may be that husbands and wives sometimes have different views about what's necessary. And I'll give you an example with my wife and I. So my wife had this job offer come through after the fire, and it was kind of a no-brainer to take the job. Before probably a difficult decision not to take the job. And she and I had actually had job offers on the East Coast that we turned down in the past because we wanted to stay in the Palisades. Now it's kind of a no-brainer to take the job, but she wanted to move the kids right away to a new school. And I said, I can't do that. I can't uproot them. I feel like it's not right for us to take them in the middle of the school year, even if they're relocated to Norris Dairy. And again, Ron, I'm not judging anyone who had that choice to make, but I wanted to keep them with their friends as long as possible, finish out the year, finish out the Little League baseball season, and then deal with what comes next. And she agreed eventually. But those decisions are difficult, and couples really have to figure that out in a careful way.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. It's definitely, I feel like, a fine balance. I mean, just to give you a little background on where we're at. So we're staying at Orinda, and my wonderful in-laws, they were so kind to take us in. You can ask my husband how he feels about living at his parents' house, but
not
um,
not
yeah,
his
but
fault.
we
I
didn't.
mean, what are you gonna do?
I mean, I can tell you this is not where I envisioned to be living in my mid 30s, but here we are. So this is his childhood house. Just to be kind of frank, he had not a great high school experience. He was probably one of like three Jewish kids in his school, he gets very triggered kind of when he's up here. And so when we were driving up on the five, I sort of asked him, I was like, okay, like how long do you want to be here? He's like, okay, well, March 1st sounds good. I was like, okay, that sounds good. And I feel like, I don't know about you, but having some kind of plan, even if it's like temporary, felt good in the moment. And that was before Leo started at his preschool now, which is actually where our nieces went. It's anybody up in the Bay Area, it's called Gani Lawn. It's at Temple Isaiah. It is so wonderful, and they've been so amazing. Also, just like communicating with Ki, and Leo misses his friends a lot, and they've done stuff where they do like a FaceTime with his old teacher, which is his teacher is Mandy. It's Chaim's daughter, and so that's been nice that they've been able to kind of keep that there, but. Anyway, so where I was going with this is I realized pretty quickly he was really happy. He was very well adjusted, which I was like very shocked. I think kids are very resilient. I know every parent kind of says that a lot, but I really was so surprised because we've done camps before and I wasn't sure, but he's been great. And I just told Eric, I was like, look, like I know that you hate it here, but like I don't want to move Leo twice in like a semester. And like I think like as much as like everyone's doing the best they can, like he's like in a real school environment. And I know that, you know, as other preschool, they're still kind of figuring it out. And so we decided to stay up here till the end of the school year. And I always kind of joke, as a mom and a wife, you're always kind of like walking this tightrope of like keeping your husband happy, keeping your kids happy. Sorry, keeping your husband happy, keeping your kids happy. And then as a mom, your happiness kind of comes last. But it's okay. I think that we made
Yeah,
the best decision and it's hard because again, like you and your wife are both looking out for the best interest of your kids and you make very very valid points. I mean, I think sports is a huge thing for kids. I feel like especially for boys, like Leo loved like his soccer in Richmond, and he was actually supposed to start pee-wee basketball at the Pali Rec Center January 15th, which obviously didn't happen, but it's hard. I don't think there's any right decision. I do think that as Ron, as you said, I think there are a lot of good life lessons. And also I just want to say I feel so empathetic or to the fact that the age of your kids and how they went through just COVID and now this. I mean, it's like can't make this stuff up. But I yeah, it's hard to kind of make parenting decisions. No one can kind of prepare you for the decisions you have to make, and I don't know if we're doing the right thing, but it feels like good. And I'm a bit of an impulsive person too, but I think if something feels good, it's probably the best thing. And I don't like to overthink things too much either because it will drive me crazy.
If I had all these conversations where I have with I live I speak to a bunch of people and they're like I live with my mother, I live with my mother-in-law, followed by like a death glare that tells you everything you need to know. Like I everything you need to know about their situation, or like people that are just thrown into, like I know this guy who's like an executive from massive like Fortune 500 company, and he's doing like these like massive international Zoom calls from his like tiny kitchen counter in like a two-bedroom, because like that's the situation they were thrown into. And it's like, what do? You have to you have to adjust. Like there's nothing, the life doesn't guarantee you anything. And so I think like that's maybe the big positive lesson here again is like for everybody to learn from this is just to adjust to new situations, learn how to be more dynamic and go with the flow.
Alicia, just another parenting issue. So the drop-offs are really difficult, and my wife and I divide our 4 kids into 2 groups. We have one group called the bigs and one called the littles, because there's a 6-year gap between the bigs and the littles. So we've got the 13-year-old and the 9-year-old, and then those are the bigs. And then you've got the 3-year-old and the infant, and those are the littles. And I thought I was doing a pretty good job because I was driving the kids everywhere. But my wife pointed out that I'm just handling the bigs, and the bigs are pretty easy. You drop them off, you pick them up, you drop them off, you pick them up. They have their own friends, they do their own thing. The littles are an incredibly difficult challenge because you're not just dropping them off. You're changing a diaper, or you're changing a dress, or you're consoling this one who fell and hurt her knee, or you're dealing with this one who just threw up all over your shirt. And it's a different level. It's like a completely different thing. And I'm getting a little taste of that now because I've got the bigs and one of the littles. And I have to give her credit. My 3-year-old has been very good. She hasn't thrown tantrums or anything like that, and she's been very good to her dad. But it is a full-time job, and I'm still waiting for my work to find out just how much time I'm spending on the kids, not on work. But it's wow, and it's. And in that sense, it's been good because it explains a lot of the last 6 months to me. Like, okay, I get why there was stress because this is really hard. This is not easy.
Yeah. No, it's really true, and I always love it when I get to go away with some girlfriends and leave my husband with the kids. I'm like, now you know,
Well, talk about that for a
not
little
so
bit.
easy.
So I want to just give people the address again. We'll give it again before the show, but it's thepalisadesmom.com, which is a great name.
Yes,
But one of the
thank you.
things that's interesting is you also have entries, and I think on social media as well, on Instagram and other social media. You can give that as well when I'm done rambling here. But you also show yourself enjoying your life. I mean, the first picture in the first blog is you enjoying what looks like a very nice glass of white wine. And the Palisades Mom is a mom and a career woman, but is also having as good a time as possible in these crazy circumstances. So talk about that. Can you enjoy life as a mom whose needs come last, right, after husband and kids? Sometimes it feels that way, I guess, but, can you still enjoy your life in your in-laws' home, displaced, with your home burnt down? I mean, you're drinking a glass of wine. Is there something to that?
I think, I am a generally very positive person. I always kind of look for the silver lining, and I think, it's important to enjoy life as best as you can, and definitely, I feel like every 4 o'clock rolls around, I'm definitely pouring myself a glass of wine these days. But yeah, I think, one of the great things I think that's kind of come from all of this is just the community. I started this group chat called Marquez Mamas. It's like, and Marquez, sort of like the lower Marquez moms, and started actually right after the Halloween block party, which I, organize every year. And I know that you've come to that, Joel.
Oh, best Halloween
Um,
party ever.
and it's going to be so epic when we come back. I will say, I feel like when all the houses are back, I think it's going to be like the Roaring Twenties. I think there's going to be so many house parties and housewarmings, and we'll probably even go big and get the In and Out food truck for the first Halloween block party back. But I think, one thing that I've been kind of like working on is setting up a girls trip for some of the Palisades moms that we've all lost our houses, and I think it's something that you need. I don't the reason I wanted to put a positive spin on the Palisades mom is like I don't want to be like doom and gloom. I think people need a level of escapism, and also just like, look, you can find the things that bring you joy, and I do think that you have to find joy with a lot less. It's I think also when you have to be on a budget, I think it kind of forces you to be a little bit more creative than I think, you know. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I know a lot of my friends, I feel like a lot of young families were pretty underinsured. And so I think in some ways it's good because you're on the same boat. And for a hot minute when I thought this whole thing was going to take like maybe 5 years, I'm glad I it's not, it sounds like. But we thought about potentially like relocating to South Florida. I went to University of Miami. I actually have a handful of friends there, and But part of me was like, I know, and even being up here, everyone's so amazing and so nice, but it's not the same as like being with your people. And I think it's also like we're going through a lot of the same things. And I was like, I don't want to feel like the poor friend. And I just feel like, I don't know. I know that sounds probably really superficial, but I want to feel good about myself. I want to be able to do things and fun things, but also like have some sort of like empathy and understanding. And I feel like that is something that you just get with other Palisadians. You just don't have to explain. I have friends that lived in like 4,000 square foot houses that now are like renting in two-bedroom, apartments. And because I feel like for all of us, we're just trying to save. But again, it kind of forces you to be a little bit creative and also just like, yeah, I think it's important to find fun in life. Otherwise, why are we here?
Yeah, that's a really interesting feeling. You don't want to feel like a poor friend. I think you could say it also that you don't want to feel like the one that people have pity on, and you want to feel like you're contributing. And I think all of us feel that way. It's interesting that I do think that the bonds among people from the Palisades have really strengthened, and I feel closer than I ever have before to my neighbors and to the place we live. And one of the things I hear most often from people in the neighborhood is, "Oh, I used to walk by your house all the time." And some people knew me before, but now we know each other again. And we're getting to know people we may have seen a million times and never spoken to before. But there is this kind of bonding that's happening. And when you're with Palisadians, you know you have something to contribute. You know
Hmm.
that everybody's leaning on everybody for something else, especially in the early days. We had a house, so we had some things in the house that we could then lend to other people if they were safe. Like I lent a set of weights to a friend who's a personal trainer. She couldn't get her weights, so she couldn't work, so she had our weights, but then we lost our access to our clothing because the
Hmm.
few things we had taken with us, we couldn't use the stuff that was in the house. It was all damaged by smoke, so someone donated a coat to me. I mean, everyone kind of helped everybody else, so you didn't feel like you
Hmm.
were a drag on anybody, nor did you feel like people needed stuff from you. It was all just kind of this chain of sharing.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's very true. And it's a very humbling process as well.
Yeah, I think it also helped. Like, I can tell with the kids, from the kids' perspective, that all of their friends are going through the same period of like moving and losing their homes, or even if not losing their homes, like being in this together. And like for the kids, that's also been easier, that there's like all their friends are dealing with it at the same time as well. So
Yeah,
it's not like your kid is the only one.
yeah,
So
it's
let
very
me ask
true.
you some advice, perspective on husbands. I have this idea, because we're all weighing all these different factors, but I have this idea that I have a duty in a way to bring my kids back to their house. And kids
Hmm.
are resilient and kids adapt, and it's amazing that Leo has adapted to the new school. And I'm sure that my kids would adapt if they never were able to go home again. But my 3-year-old keeps talking about her house. This is the biggest thing that's ever happened, this dislocation, this event. And she'll just walk up to strangers sometimes and say, "Are you here to fix the fence? Or did your house burn down?" And she's 3 years old. So she knows about what happened, and we've tried to shield her from it a little bit. But I feel a kind of fatherly obligation to bring them back. And maybe that's irrational. Am I being crazy, or should I detach myself and just try to think about this completely in an abstract universe of what makes sense financially and where we are at the moment? I mean, how should I be making this decision if and are you seeing husbands wrestle with the same question? I feel like it is almost like a male thing. You want to restore that which your kids and your family had before.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you're definitely not crazy. You're just a dad trying to figure it out, just like the rest of us. I think that, I think every parent thinks about that as far as like, do you bring your kids back? And every kid's different. I think every parent's different. My neighbor, diagonal from us, her son Atlas is basically 1 year older than Leo, which was really great for like hand-me-downs because they have excellent taste. But she's just a very sort of like straightforward person, and she was just like, I had to do it because Atlas wouldn't stop talking about it, and finally I was like, all right, like let's you need to see this. And so she actually took him back, and for her kind of family, and I think that was like the best move. And then from there she's like, we kind of like started having some kind of like dark humor fun with it. Like, I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you guys have read the book Dragons Love Tacos. And she was sort of like, yeah, now she's like, did a dragon come to her house and burn the house? I mean, it's a little dark, but I mean, I felt that was a way for them to kind of heal. And like, I'm sort of wrestling with stuff too. And like, I think for us, and again, I would be curious for your 3-year-old, but my son loves construction. Like he thinks it's like the coolest thing. When Livorna had all those like big trucks, I'm like, oh my God, this would be like his heaven. So I think for us, I guess I feel like once things are in a positive direction of like the new house, I feel like that's like when I think it'll make sense for us to bring Leo when it's like doesn't feel like a total, that there's nothing there. So I think every kid's different. I think you as a parent have good parental instincts, and I think that you kind of know your kid best and how that they'll handle it, and like maybe it'll help them kind of heal. I do think
Well,
kids
I
are
mean, like bringing them
pretty.
back in a bigger sense. I mean, so you're talking about bringing back to visit, and I brought the
Oh,
older
okay.
two kids. We hesitated on the 3-year-old, although we
Yeah.
did eventually bring her back, and that's another story which I can tell if you want. But I mean, I'm talking about long term, like coming back to this house, to this place. You know, sometimes the financial obstacles seem pretty daunting, but I do feel like that has to be the goal. And
hmm
am I too invested in that emotionally?
I Okay, I see what you're saying. I don't think that you're too invested. I think it's their home, and I think that look, the way that I want to look at this whole thing about coming back to the Palisades is we were such a tight-knit community, and I think that we will be even more tight-knit, better, stronger, and I think the Palisades will become even more beautiful. And from a financial perspective, as from a real estate agent, I think all of our real estate values are going to exponentially increase once we're back. But I think I don't know. I think in a way that to leave and then have this be like their biggest memory and never come back, I don't know. It feels a little too open-ended. And I think that coming back and creating a beautiful life there again will kind of, I don't know. I think maybe and closure is not the right word, but I think it'll make it all sort of feel like it was worth going through that because it's like to just leave. I mean, again, I know everybody's making the right decision for their family, but I think that you also are just so part of this community too. And I think if you left, it'd be a really sad thing for our community. And I think that
Well,
I don't know. I think it'll be a big homecoming when everybody comes back, and I think yeah, I think
uh,
I,
yeah, I agree with you. I mean, that's how I feel about it too. But I think it does help to have the perspective of moms who may be looking out, I think, for the immediate needs of children and family, whereas maybe, and this is maybe stereotypical, but maybe fathers are trying to think in big abstract terms that aren't necessarily practical. Ron, I don't know if you had if you've had those kinds of discussions.
I'm not judging anybody on based on anything. Like I think everybody's got to make the right decisions for their families. I totally, from a male perspective, agree with you on what you're saying. Like I have this very hard urge to rebuild. However, that's not for everybody. And if like you rebuild or you rebuild somewhere else, like I think the end note of it is you want to go back to the Palisades and show that you made something better, even if it's like living in a different neighborhood, or maybe it's like you rebuilt the home and you reestablish yourself somewhere else, like you go back home or whatever, another part of the country. I think the story arc is the important one. Is like you came out better than you did going in, despite going all through this really big mess. That's the message that you want to, have at the end of it, and at the end of this rebuilding story. I don't think it necessarily has to be attached to the specific lot on the specific house that you had at the Palisades. I think that can happen, 100 different ways. Everybody has their own stories and their own things that they're dealing with. And whether you're crazy or not, that's a separate issue. That's a whole other episode, Joe.
Yeah, we need a mental health episode to figure that one out. But Alicia, you mentioned real estate. Obviously, you are known to the community and have been known to the community through your work, through Westside Luxury Real Estate, and you have a separate website. I'll give that address as well, aliciadrycohen.com, ALICIADRYCOHEN.com. And we've had several real estate professionals on the show, but let me ask you, in your professional capacity, aside from being a mom and all of the other things you do, you sound very optimistic about the future of real estate in the Palisades.
I do. I think, it's a long road ahead. I think, look, there's a lot of conversations that have to happen that, leadership, you know, coming together and rebuilding our town. I think that, I mean, even just as simple as like the wires going under the ground, I think that that's something that really needs to happen. I also think that when this town gets rebuilt, I think it is going to have to be fire safe, partly because I don't think the state can afford to have another disaster like this happen again. I think that also, as far as, rebuilding with fireproof materials, now is that going to be more expensive, and what does that mean for our real estate values? Well, one, I think, building with those type of materials will definitely increase values. I think people are now always going to be a little bit on edge about that, but I also think that, California historically has done a good job of like doing things like tax rebates. Like when we added solar, we were able to get a tax write-off. Also, we had just re sorry, what you call that? Retrofitted our foundation, and we had applied for an EBB grant, which was like 3,000 and dollars towards it. So that helps. So I do feel like hopefully that will maybe mitigate some of the costs for rebuilding. I mean, but yeah, I do think that Palisades has always been like a desirable neighborhood, and I think that when everything's, brand new and built beautifully, I think it's going to be even more gorgeous. And I think that, I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I think that it really will be the best neighborhood in all of LA and maybe all of California. And
Yeah,
before I go, I want to
right.
introduce you to my boss,
Okay.
Ava. Ava. She's the one that rules house. Want to come here?
Oh, this is exciting.
Hi.
Mama's here.
Hi.
Look, there she is.
Yeah. Can you say hi? Can you say hi, Ava? Hello. Are you mommy's twin? You're really shy right now.
She's just fascinated by these strange faces on
Mwah.
the monitor. Well,
Yeah.
listen, Alicia, you've been incredibly generous with your time and everything you're doing to balance work and life and all the challenges of family. But let's give the web address one more time. It's thepalisadesmom.com. The Palisades Mom.
Yes.
That's the new writing project, and I'd love to contribute a dad's perspective. Maybe Ron would as well. I don't know. But Ron, any last thoughts before we let Alicia have the last word?
No, just it's great to have all these different perspectives. I think a parenting angle is like wonderful to have on a podcast, and we keep on delaying this like mental health one, and I keep on thinking about like just all new angles that we should be introducing to the podcast. So thanks for being on the pod, and safe rebuilding.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And like, subscribe, and follow the Palisades Mom.
That's right.
All
Palisades
right.
Mom. And your
The three
Instagram
homeless
or
guys.
other social media?
Yeah. So it's my Instagram's the Palisades Mom on Instagram. I also have a personal one too, which is just my name, Alicia Dry Cohen. But yeah, follow me
Awesome.
there too.
All right, thanks for listening. You can follow us at threehomelessguys.com. Any ideas, comments, suggestions, pod@threehomelessguys.com. Like, comment, subscribe, follow all those things. Until next time,
Yeah.
this is Joel.
Thank you. All right. Thanks so much, guys. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Three Homeless Guys. If this episode hit home, please subscribe to our channel. Check out threehomelessguys.com for RSS feeds to your favorite streaming service. Follow us on social and share this with a friend who needs to hear it. Drop us a review or shoot us a message at pod@threehomelessguys.com. We'd love to hear from you. Stay strong, and we'll catch you next time.